let's talk about parole in place. Let's just start at the very top.
Totally. So the basics are that parole is awesome, and I'm going to explain why. So parole in place is like a historical presidential authority, right? To grant individuals who are in the United States right now something called parole, which is a temporary permission to live and work in the United States without having to leave the US. And the reason why that is so great is because of the following. So now you would think that because the United States says that one of the bedrock principles of our immigration system is family unity, you would think that if you married a US citizen, that you could just get your green card, because in fact, the immigration law says that. So some people who marry a US citizen are able to very quickly get their green card, but it is contingent on how they entered the United States in the first place. And and we all know this, not all of us had the same access to being from the same country that maybe doesn't even require a visa to come to the United States. But if you happen to be from a country where it's really hard to get a visa, there's no visa waiver, or you were fleeing persecution, say, as just some examples, and you enter the country without status, you're generally locked out of getting that green card, even though you're married to a US citizen, unless you jump through hoops. And so President Biden announced a program that he was going to use parole in place for a certain group of individuals who were married to US citizens, individuals who have been in the country 10 years or longer. And that is what we're waiting, kind of with bated breath, to open up on August 19th so that these families can be properly recognized.
So in terms of like documentation, costs, do we know what to expect?
We have some really good educated guesses, and I think it's important to give those to folks, right? Because if you are a person or your loved one is in this category, you want to apply as quickly as possible. Here are educated guesses. We know that you're going to have to show proof of marriage. So that's a good document to gather up. Get that marriage certificate, get whatever you have. You're going to need to prove that. So marriage to a US citizen, you're going to need to get the marriage document and the proof of your citizenship for your spouse, right? So those are obvious. In addition, the White House has been clear in kind of their press releases that you need to have been in the United States for 10 years. So, and we've run this drill, right? Like DACA recipients know they had to show continuous residence in the United States for 5 years prior to the announcement of DACA, right? So you want to find the handiest documents in your name to show that you've been here for at least 10 years. Sometimes this is your lease. Sometimes this is utility bills in your names. Sometimes this is a transcript if you went to a school for multiple years, right? Like, so start thinking, what are the documents where I can show for each of these 10 years that I was in the United States? You don't need to have been at the same address. Don't worry about that. You're just trying to show United States. So those are some things that I would gather. And then on fees and on the form, we don't know yet, but we can make an educated guess, right? The words are parole in place. So there's a form out there for advanced parole. Like, you get it, kind of like sounds like parole. So, I would take a gander at the advanced parole form, which is the I-131, and ignore the questions that are specific to DACA, which is like a whole page, and be like, okay, how would I answer these? And then I would say, well, we're guessing here, educated guess, it costs $630 to apply for advanced parole. So I would ballpark guess that we would be looking at a similar fee to apply for parole in place.
In terms of like proof of the last 10 years of residency, will one document per year be sufficient? Do we need to break it down by month? How much paper should people be prepared to print out here?
Yeah. At a minimum, I agree with you. If it's easy to give more, right? But you don't need to, do not picture that you need like muchas cajas and like to be rolling up with boxes of paperwork to justify that you've been here for 10 years. At a minimum, you need to show one document that touches on every single one of those 10 years. But remember, if you happen to go to a 4-year college during that period and your transcript shows that, then like that's 4 years covered in one document. That's cool. Super cool. Don't feel that you have to do that. If you like think about like utility bills, and again, like, do you have to show like every single month? Well, not necessarily. You could do like 4 of them for a quarter, because if you like paid the electric bill at the same address in January that you paid it in April, we're pretty sure you were still there. So that's kind of what I would do. I would make sure that you have something covering every year. And if you want to do a little more than that, like 2 documents per year, great. But that would be kind of my, again, rule of thumb for a baseline. Each case is different. It depends on what the document is, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. If you have school records, if you have anything of that matter, right? Like it's not like you have to like get that and every bill for every month of that year. There's a couple of questions here about that continue to be about eligibility. One of them has to be whether or not there's an age cap for people who are planning to apply for parole in place. There's a separate question again on an eligibility, whether or not people who have a type of immigration bar are eligible to apply for this. And then the last one, I guess, is age, immigration bar. If you are a DACA recipient married to a U.S. citizen, would you be able to also apply for this?
Yep. Great. Those are all great questions. So let's do age cap first. I have heard nothing. Juan, you should tell me if you've heard anything that would indicate that there's any kind of age cap on this program. So long as you were old enough to get married, you good to go, right? And, I joke about that, but you have to have a valid marriage, right? Like we know that.
And the 10
But
years.
after 10 years in the
Yep.
country, my understanding is that we don't know the exact date. We'll be looking for this when we see the documents, that you needed to be married around the time of the White House announcement, right? So if you got married last week, you were probably not going to qualify. I am sorry about that. But you could have been married for 2 months, right? Or 20 years. And I think this is really important about the age cap, right? Like DACA, so important. DACA has allowed so many people to get status, many people like you, Juan, to move from DACA to a more permanent status, but it was age bound. There was a cap. And so it has been a long time coming since we've been able to talk about the need to recognize our mixed status families, regardless of how old the undocumented person is. And so that's a beautiful thing. Immigration bars. My answer is less cheery here. We don't know everything yet. Okay. If I was queen of the world, your immigration bars would not preclude you if you met the other criteria from parole in place. But because I am yet to be in charge of these things, I think it is extremely likely that some immigration bars will block people's eligibility. From what I've heard, for example, and this is heartbreaking to me because there are people that I know and love who are in this category, because you know what? It's hard to be a long-term undocumented person in the United States without running into immigration bars. Like, it's just hard. So folks who have what's called a permanent bar, I think are very unlikely to be eligible to apply. We have to wait and read what they put out close to August 19th to know for sure. That said, there are lots of other bars in place, right? For example, let me just give you some crazy talk about U.S. immigration. If you are a parent and you brought your child with you when you came into the country without lawful permission, you can be charged with something called the smuggling bar for bringing your child. I don't think that will preclude people, and people get charged with this, Juan. They marry a U.S. citizen, they go outside of the country to consular process, which is the old scary way of doing things when there's no parole in place, and they get charged with this bar. Bars like that, I am hopeful, will not preclude people and has kept our families separated for too long, but we're gonna have to read the paperwork.
DACA recipients. Let's talk about DACA recipients applying for this parole in place program, and let's just in a hypothetical scenario, if someone is in the country but is currently detained, would they be able to apply for this program?
Okay, the answer, I believe, to both questions are yes, and let me say a little bit more about why. So let's take DACA recipients first. So if you are a DACA recipient with current DACA right now, you should have both work authorization and protection from removal. But if you are a DACA recipient, and the best numbers tell us 92% of DACA recipients came in the country without a lawful entry, who has not done advanced parole. You might love to have yourself some parole in place because it would allow you to go ahead and apply for adjustment of status without needing to consular process or leave the United States. And there is nothing that bars DACA recipients from applying for this. So if that's you, you're a DACA recipient, you're married to a US citizen, you've been in the country at least 10 years, and you haven't done advanced parole, you might want to consider doing this just to get the parole in place, because that should smooth your process to apply for adjustment of status. So that is really worth considering. And it might even be faster than the backlogs that we're seeing right now for advanced parole. It can take 4 months for your advanced parole application to be processed. This is a new program. It could go faster. So that's nice. If you are currently in detained or in deportation proceedings, or both, Juan, both, right?
Let's say both.
Let's say both. Yes, you should be able to apply. Now, everybody put on their, like, remember way back when brain. Remember when DACA opened in 2012 and there was a whole procedure for terminating deportation proceedings and for allowing individuals who were prima facie eligible, meaning looks like they meet the criteria for DACA, if they were detained or in proceedings, to have those at least temporarily suspended and then closed while they apply. Like if they apply and get through, then the proceedings get closed. So yes, 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 yes. If this is you and you are, or your loved one and you're in detention or you're in deportation proceedings, you're already known to the federal government, right? Like they're already initiating proceedings against you. So the risk of coming forward for the first time, you don't have that issue, right? Like you're not saying to yourself, what happens if Harris is not elected president? You're not worried about that because you're already known to the government. Absolutely. We expect that those individuals can apply and that it may in fact be a way to get their deportation proceedings terminated and out of detention.
Let's say that I have a pending immigration petition already in progress. Can you apply for parole in place?
Yes, and you might want to, depending on what kind of petition it is. So for example, one of the most common petitions for individuals who are married to US citizens is something called, let's get nerdy, the I-601A waiver. That is a waiver that allows individuals who can show extreme hardship if they are not able to adjust their status and are married to US citizens, to get a waiver of these various immigration bars that we've been talking about and to get their green card. But there is a multi-year backlog for the granting of that, right? Meaning you've already gone into the system, you've shown you have a qualifying marriage, and they're like, we love you, but we have a 4-year backlog. And you're prohibited during that time from getting work authorization. So if that's you and you have a pending I-601A waiver petition, parole in place might be great because it gives you work authorization and it could short circuit this process and then allow you to complete your green card, your adjustment of status in the US. So that's just one example of the different kinds of pending petitions you might have. But if you're stuck in some multi-year backlog, it is worth looking into whether parole in place could get you entirely out of that backlog or get you a work authorization if you don't have one already.
Any potential risks to people who are covered under VAWA if they're doing PIP? There's also a separate question about, I was married to a U.S. citizen, now I'm divorced, will I still be eligible for PIP?
On the first question about VAWA, there, as a categorical matter, there's not a risk. Like it depends, obviously, if you're doing VAWA, how close you are and how long the backlog is until you could get a green card, right? But there's nothing per se that would put your VAWA application at risk or slow it down from trying to do PIP, which may be a faster route to you. I do not know about the divorce question. I haven't seen that answered yet. There are provisions, so that's something we should look for. There are provisions under US immigration law that does allow, for example, individuals who had already begun a process of getting a green card while they were married to a US citizen to continue after either the death of the US citizen or divorce, but it can be complicated. So we're gonna have to wait and see what USCIS says about that and whether or not at the time of application, your spouse needs to be one, your legal spouse currently, and two, still alive.
Can I apply while waiting for my 212E to be forgiven? And there's another 212 question. Any hope for PIP for someone outside, I'm assuming outside of the country, but has completed the permanent bar, has completed an immigration bar, and is waiting on an I-212 waiver decision?
Okay, so for the second one, somebody outside of the country, they are not going to qualify. You have to be in the United States for this application. So, but I love that that person has already completed the permanent bar, and it sounds like is doing all the right things, and I hope they get that waiver decision soon. I am actually not sure. Read me the 212E again.
Can I apply while waiting for my 212E to be forgiven?
Okay. Um, that is probably a question that merits a discussion with the individual attorney who worked on the 212E. I would check in. I think that it may well be the case that applying in is absolutely fine. There are many categories in which it's fine to file an additional application, but because no doubt that person worked with a legal representative, I would double check with them before applying. And again, that's the kind of question that that legal representative can take now. There's enough information out there about the program for them to say, yes, absolutely, you can still apply. No, that would be a horrible idea, and here's why. Or I maybe, but I just want to wait and see, and here's what I'll be looking for when they put out the FAQs on the program.
There's a couple of questions, and just to kind of dive in here real quick. Can somebody apply for PIP while waiting on a response on an I-601A and advanced parole?
Yes. I believe yes on both. Absolutely. And I-601A waivers can be a 4-year backlog. PIP could be much faster. Advanced parole has a current backlog of often 4 months. And again, PIP could be processed much faster than that. And as a side note, I'm making a plug for us to call it something different than PIP because PIP sounds weird. I understand that those are the acronyms, but I think that we should like talk about the values we're honoring, like keep families together or something. I'm just putting it out there.
Can we apply for PIP online, or will this be something that we have to mail in?
Good question. We don't know for sure. I believe, right? Because, and this is somebody who really knows stuff, because advanced parole, believe it or not, you have to mail in. I could hold up to you a stack of advanced paroles that I have been mailing in. It is a required mail form. This form could be a required online form. That is something we're going to find out. I'm hoping that it's online because I think it'll be faster. I know that that requires people to set up their USCIS accounts and that kind of thing, but it also allows things like really quick receipts to get sent in, quick notifications, or if you are asked to provide more evidence, that's something you can submit online also. And hopefully that would improve the efficiency of the program.
All right. A couple of additional questions in here. I'm going to let my team capture them so that way we can take a look at them and see if we can host another chat here with our dear friend Karen Tumlin from the Justice Action Center. I'm just going to repeat back a couple of the plugs that I made in the beginning of this program. If you need a lawyer or have questions about PIP eligibility or any other type of immigration process that you're trying to apply, we have a guide at informedimmigrant.org where you can essentially get help from a local organization in your state. You can plug in your zip code and we can find an organization that may be able to help you, as well as low bono or pro bono attorney resources that may also be able to assist you in case that you're in a crunch out there. Additionally, if you have not followed the wonderful team over at the Justice Action Center, it takes just a second. You can do it right now. You can just click follow Justice Action Center, follow Karen Tumlins and her amazing and talented team of immigration attorneys and can I say badasses on this live stream? I think I'm just gonna say that they're badasses and just take the fall in case my team comes back for me later. But as always, it's a pleasure to speak with Karen and hear from her expertise. Just a last note from me: if you have been watching this program, or if you're just tuning in about Parole in Place, Remember, and this is very important, the program is not available yet. If someone is promising you an application, is asking for money, is saying to send an application today or tomorrow or the next day, know that that is not true and that you should always speak to a licensed professional before making any sort of harsh decision, because as of this moment, Thursday, August 8th, 2024, we're still waiting from the federal government to give us additional guidance so that way we can find out more and bring you the answers. Karen, last comments, questions that you may have, or greetings to our audience that is still here.
Yes, thank you so much to the Informed Immigrant team for hosting this, to you, my wonderful friend Juan, for getting us through so much good content and caring about people. And I guess the last thing that I want to say is just, why I am excited about this program. Juan and I were making jokes about our own immigration stories earlier, but it really kind of says it all, right? Like, there is no difference between my parents and the fact that one of them was a US citizen and one of them was an immigrant, and Juan and his lovely spouse. All of our families should be able to be safe, to be free, to know that they won't be separated, and to be able to get green cards. And it shouldn't depend on what country you are from or the way that you first came into the United States, right? Like, we should honor that choice to build a family and a life together, regardless of it's my parents, Juan's parents, Juan himself. And I think that this program brings us closer to that, which is really an uplifting thing.
I'm going to punch in the Informed Immigrant website here since there's some comments asking for it again. I want to thank Karen for those amazing words and those reminders, right? That whether you're from Venezuela, like I am, or whether you're from Canada, like Karen's family is from, there is obviously, certain things that we need to keep in mind about the realities of our immigration system, and essentially the roadblocks that continue to impede a lot of people from adjusting their status or living that life of normalcy that they so cherish next to their loved ones. As I mentioned at the top, former DACA recipient, now green card holder, committed to this work, just as Karen is. May not be a lawyer, but I want to make sure that I continue to be a resource for people here. Thank you for the Informed Immigrant team for inviting me to be a host of this program. Thank you to Karen and the Justice Action Center for lending their expertise. Again, our website, informedimmigrant.org. You can find it on our Instagram page. If you haven't followed us, follow us. And if you haven't followed Karen's amazing work, Justice Action Center, I assure you, is worth your time and your like and share. Take care. Thank you to everybody who joined. Greetings from Los Angeles, and we'll be back as soon as we hear anything from the federal government regarding parole in place and what exactly this process is going to look like. We're hoping to get answers in the next couple of days. Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you, friend. Bye, Juan.
Take care.